thought this was a pretty good pool post. You
Just needed that dopamine.
Okay, it is 6:30. I am going to call the meeting to order. TJ, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson is absent.
Good evening, welcome. My name is Kelly Davis. I am this year's Board of Education President. To my left is Board Vice President Amber Epling-Skinner, Treasurer TJ Cusick. To my right is Superintendent Dr. Trent Bowers, Board Member Stephanie Harless, and Board Member Jennifer Best. If you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. May I please have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or corrections? Okay, TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling-Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
motion carries. No visitor comments. Okay, thank you, Vicki. Now we will be joined by Rob Messenheimer, our Director of Elementary Education, who will give us an update on the district's Title I program.
Thank you, Vicki. Share about our Title I programming here in Worthington schools and how we use that grant funding to support students within our schools. So just as a little primer here and setting some background, Title I is the largest federally funded education grant in the country. And its purpose really is to level the playing field for students that come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So we know that poverty has great impact on educational outcomes for children. So lower graduation rates, increased absenteeism, lack of mastery of basic literacy and mathematics skills in many cases, and less readiness for school. So Title I is a way to help us put resources at schools that have a higher than typical populations of students that might have greater risk factors for their educational performance within our schools. So we'll talk tonight about what services look like in Worthington schools, but before we do that, I want to take a look at just how do we decide which schools are served, and then also take a look at our populations of schools within Worthington and how those look different from school to school. So one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, with suburban schools is that there's not need within our schools. So I think as we go through this presentation tonight, we'll kind of dispel that just by looking at our own schools here. There is need within Worthington schools. Title I is one way that helps us support students that might have a higher level of need and a greater risk. So to access Title I grant funds, each year we're required to fill out a grant funding application. So AAPL department, TJ, our assistant treasurer, work closely together to fill out that grant application each year. For Title I specifically, one of the requirements is we have to submit a rank order of our schools to identify which schools might have the highest populations of students with risk factors that would impact their educational experience. So what you see on the screen there is a rank order of our schools by economically disadvantaged status. So on the far right there, that percentage is percentage of students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch at each school. So through the funding application, you have to identify one measure that you're going to apply across all of our schools in an equal way. So we've chosen to use free and reduced lunch percentage at each school as that measure. And so for a family to qualify for free and reduced benefits at school, their household income has to fall below federally established guidelines. So for free lunch, that's 130% of the poverty guideline, and for reduced lunch, that's 185% of that same guideline. So just a reminder though, in Worthington, regardless of whether you meet that free threshold or the reduced benefit, we provide free lunch in our schools. A few years ago, a positive change was made too for families. So if a family is already receiving other federal benefits, so something like SNAP or TAMF, they automatically qualify for free and reduced lunch, and they don't have to go through a separate application process. So that's been a positive for families that might be receiving those benefits as well. So when you look at the chart on your screen, there, you're going to notice a disparity of the populations of our schools. And I just wanted to point out that in Worthington, we have smaller neighborhood-based schools. So when we're pulling from a smaller area, we tend to have a little bit greater difference in the population of our school makeup in some cases. So just wanted to point that up. If you're pulling a larger school that's pulling from multiple neighborhoods, those variances might not be quite what you see on the screen. So when you look at Worthington, we have Evening Street with 4% of the students come from economically disadvantaged households. And then we have Slate Hill, who above 60% of the students in the school are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So some variation there. Again, Title I is meant to put resources in schools that have greater need. So with Title I, we receive a certain pot of money each year based on the number of disadvantaged students that we serve in the district. And so part of our work when we're filling out that funding application is we need to think about how much funding do we have and how many schools can we support with the amount of funding that we receive. So that first step is what we looked at on the last page, is putting together that rank order. And then within the funding guidelines, you're also able to consider grade band rank ordering. So in Worthington, we've chosen to take the approach of using the grade band rank ordering. And the reason for that is, so this allows us to look at K through 5 grade band, 6 through 8, and then also our high schools. In Worthington, we've chosen to prioritize our elementaries and our middle schools. And the purpose for that is really the impact that early intervention has on kids, not just while they're young, but over the entirety of their school career. So we'll hit on this again in just a minute, but we do utilize that grade band rank order when deciding which schools to serve here in Worthington. So once we decide which schools are going to serve, they're going to fall into one of two categories under Title I. So the first of those is targeted assistance. So a school that falls into what's called a targeted assistance category just means that any funds that are allocated to that school through Title I have to be used only for students in the school that demonstrate the greatest academic risk. So we have a really strong MTSS process in all of our schools where we're throughout the year coming to the table and really considering the progress of each child in our schools. We use that process to identify students that might benefit from this targeted intervention and assistance that we're able to provide through Title I. So I would want to note that in all of our schools, we do have a level of intervention for every student, regardless of whether it's a Title I designated school or not. There is intervention in each school. What Title I allows us to do is provide a little more intervention resources to those schools that have that greater need. So the other category is a school-wide category. So in order for a building to qualify for the school-wide designation, they have to have over 40% of their population be eligible for free and reduced lunch, or from a low-income backgrounds. So the only difference is really how you can choose to use your funds. So in a school-wide setting, the district could choose to use their funds to support programming across the entirety of the school. So another way to look at it is in a school-wide program, every child's kind of considered to be a Title I student, just because of the high population of students that come from low-income backgrounds. Okay, this is that same chart that we looked at previously with the rank order of all of our schools. This time, anything that's denoted in blue there is a school that we currently serve through Title I here in Worthington. On the far right column, it notes if they're a targeted assistance building or if they're a school-wide building. So Brookside Elementary, Worthing Way Middle, Colonial Hills, Liberty, Worthington Estates, Granby, Worthington Park, Perry Middle School, and Slate Hill all receive some element of Title I funding. So we do have to look under Title I and kind of distribute our resources that we receive through that funding in a way that supports schools that have more need get more resources at those schools. So a couple things just to point out here. So we've seen our population of economically disadvantaged students grow here in the last decade. So in 10 years ago, in the 2015-16 school year, we were at about 26% of our student population came from low-income households. This year, as we start the year, we're sitting at about 34%. So on the screen, you're going to see the district average noted as 31. These are last year's numbers that we've used to make decisions on which buildings we're going to serve for this school year. So that's where that difference comes from. Because of the increase in students that we've had that come from economically disadvantaged households, we've received more funding over the course of the past few years, so we've been able to expand Title I programming. So 2 years ago, we were able to add to Worthington Estates and Granby Elementary, and then this year, we've brought Worthing Way Middle School online as part of our Title I program as well. 3 of our buildings qualify for school-wide designations. So that's Worthington Park, Perry Middle School, and Slate Hill Elementary. This is the first year that Worthington Park and Perry have qualified for that. So we're currently working on plans that we'll submit to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce that'll detail how we intend to support that school-wide implementation in those three buildings. Last thing I'd want to note on this graphic. So when you look at it, Kilbourne High School stands out as kind of being within that pack there of schools that are served. So I just want to kind of revisit what we talked about on the previous slide, that we've chosen to use that ordering system of looking at our grade bands and prioritizing that early intervention. And that's why you don't see Kilbourne High School served under Title I. And then finally, I just want to talk about services. How do we use our funds to help support our students here in Worthington? So Title I has a motto, and it's supplement, not supplant. And so what that means is any funds that come to us through Title I should be used to kind of create an in addition for students, not replacing something that we already fund or something that already exists or that we would otherwise pay for out of our general fund. So we received last year about $1.3 million through Title I. We'll receive a similar amount this school year as well. We use those funds primarily to add intervention staff to our building. So we know we're in a people-oriented business. So we're able this year to fund 10.5 full-time equivalent teachers that provide both math and reading intervention across our Title I served schools. Additional funds we use to support curriculum and resources, instructional supplies that support those Title I classrooms. And then lastly, 1% of all of the total dollars that we receive through Title I have to be earmarked for family engagement. So each building, each year, participates in developing a family engagement plan. Those live on our website, so we're currently updating them for this school year. And those will be up by September 30th on each school that is served through Title I. And when we say family engagement, it means a couple different things. So we have a requirement through Title I to make sure that we have systems in place to gather feedback from parents, allow parents to have input on programming. So buildings hold quarterly meetings where parents have an opportunity to join and provide feedback and learn more about Title I and what's happening in buildings. Buildings also host events like literacy nights or math nights, and those are focused on enhancing that partnership between parents and schools and helping set parents up for success when they work with their child at home. So that's a bit about family engagement. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to the board if there's any questions about Title I.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was very helpful. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to start with Jennifer. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, because sometimes we get questions and the schools that get targeted assistance or the whole school, it's confusing. So this is super helpful. So when you do choose the schools and who's targeted and who's the whole school, I mean, is ODE checking on that or advising? Do you have to turn things into them? How does that all work?
Yeah, great question. So through that funding application that we complete each year, we do have to turn in kind of our data behind why we selected certain schools. So that rank ordering is something that we have to turn in. And we really have a requirement to serve schools that have the greatest needs. So that's sort of driven by ODE. The difference between targeted assistance and school-wide, that's something that's dictated by Title I itself in terms of qualifying for whether you can be school-wide by hitting that 40% threshold.
Okay, and this is maybe more for TJ, but we have our Title I funds for this year?
We do. So the federal year is a year behind. So what was approved last year will fund this year's school year. But what the United States Congress will talk about coming up will be the next federal budget, and that will fund 26, 27, which is sort of up in the air.
Okay.
I would say this, big picture, what worries me is that, Rob said it there, supplement, not supplant. We get this funding, the state of Ohio funds a school district operationally, and then we get this additional funding to level up these students. Now the federal government wants to maybe turn this into a block grant to the state to have control over, which is fine if it truly works that way. But then the state has recently talked about us putting our federal dollars onto our 5-year forecast. And then you ask yourself, why would you do that? Well, that leads me to believe that potentially they would then reduce state funding, replacing it with federal funding. And then you lose the supplement, not supplant. So we'll have to keep an eye on that big picture, how that shakes out. But as far as this current school year, we've been approved for it.
Great, thank you. You knocked out one of mine. I have a lot. Okay, so I'm just curious, and you may not know this, why do we have to submit a rank order of our schools? Like outside of that, targeted versus school-wide, like what do they do with that information?
Yeah, so I think we submit that's an assurance with that the grant funds are actually being used to serve your most at-risk student population. So that's why they require that, is just to make sure that we're operating within those guidelines. Yeah.
And then, so looking at this, there's, almost no difference between Brookside and Wilson. So how do you evaluate like where you're going to do that targeted assistance, knowing that we have a finite number of resources, right? But like what tips that scale? Yeah,
so I guess it's a two-factor thing. So one is that rank order piece. So in this case, Brookside is just a touch ahead, but you're right, it is just a touch ahead. The other thing is we really have to look at how much funding are we receiving and how many, in this case, positions can we afford to fund through. So we're somewhat limited by the dollars that we receive and the number of positions that we could fund. So should we receive more, we might be able to expand that programming to other schools. Yeah. But we would really work closely with TJ and Brian to make those determinations on what can we really afford within that title fund.
do you know what the data looks like around the efficacy of like a school-wide initiative versus, or school-wide assistance versus targeted assistance?
Yeah, I would say in Worthington that honestly, they're very similar programs. So since we've decided to use our funds primarily for interventionist people, those intervention services look pretty similar. So some school-wide buildings might use their funds to run an alternative curriculum, let's say at a school-wide building. We haven't approached it that way. We've approached it by adding additional interventionists in the building. So yeah, very similar. That's a great question.
Okay. And are those, I think I know the answer to this, but are those interventionists only serving Title I or free and reduced lunch kids? Or are they serving everybody? But
no. So the way what we need to do is assess their academic risk. So it's not necessarily a low income, a student from a low income household that is receiving that intervention. But we know that schools that have a higher population of low income students, there's just greater risk in the school.
It's really being driven by the MTSS data and. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
When we see the growth, so we're up from 31% to 34%, but this has been a growing trend, I'm assuming. This is twofold. Do we assume that that trend will continue to grow? And if so, are we seeing it, well, not even if so, but are we seeing it across the district or in specific neighborhoods within the district?
Yeah, we've definitely seen kind of our northeast quadrant continue to grow. So we've seen Worthington Park and Slate Hill continue to demonstrate more need. Worthington Estates has gone up a bit, and they pull students from up in that quadrant as well. So that part of our district has definitely shown increased need. In terms of whether it will continue to grow or not, I guess there'd be uncertainty. I don't know that I could answer that right now, but definitely something we'll continue to monitor.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about funds for family engagement, because we know that it's that northeast quadrant. Are we able to target those neighborhoods? Like we know that early reading, like early or before elementary school intervention is the best way, but not always possible. Are we able to target those neighborhoods, or have we thought about things like that? Or
Yeah, so the way we have to divide those funds that come from Title I, so we can talk outside of Title I too, because right, that's something that we could do. As far as Title I goes, we have to look at, we divide those funds by the number of students that they have in their building. So those buildings do receive a bit more family engagement funds because they're tied to the number of students in the building that come from low-income households. So certainly have the possibility to do things. So all of our schools, like I said, do engage in putting on evenings. Like I can give you an example. I know Slate Hill recently invested in some translation devices that they use at their Title I nights to better engage their families, just knowing their population there too. So, but that's a great question.
I think this is my last question. So maybe thinking about how we value neighborhood schools, which is incredibly important. This is maybe not a fair, maybe you question, but do we continue to look at our feeder patterns and kind of just the demographics across our specifically elementary and middle schools? Like, is there one? I know multiple factors go into it. So if we see this continue to grow, I don't know. I think.
Yeah, so first of all, I think we're really proud of, if we go back, Rob, to the first slide, one of the things we've worked hard on for 6 years that has come to fruition this year is really the balance between Thomas Worthington and Worthington Kilbourne. And that balance was not there 6 years ago, and it wasn't close. And right now we see really balanced high schools, both from an enrollment standpoint, from a free and reduced lunch standpoint, from a demographic standpoint, all the way around. So I think our feeder patterns are something we always need to evaluate, right? That those are going to always evolve, and so something that we always need to take a look at. We do have quirky sized buildings, so it's not a simple, the reason that Kilbourne Middle School has 2 elementary schools going to it versus 3 is it's our smallest elementary school. So the size of buildings, makes that constant evaluation challenging, but nothing stays static. So, as it evolves, we'll, as a district, need to continue to make decisions to evolve with it.
Yeah. Thank you. This was incredibly helpful.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Most of my questions I feel like have been answered, and this has been a great presentation, so thank you for that. I feel like most of my concerns with the future of Title I are funding related, and that's kind of a you thing, TJ. And I know that you don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not going to ask you to, try and predict the future here. But so I guess if we're living in the here and now with, what the funding is and what the programs we're providing are, do we collect any data or do we analyze any type of, you mentioned at the beginning about how, poverty has this incredible impact on educational outcomes. Do we track these students who are receiving Title I assistance and have anything to point to that this is helping, that if we needed to tell the story, I'm thinking down the road here a little bit, about how this is effective and these are good use of taxpayer dollars? Do we have information like that we gather now?
So I guess in two ways. So at the individual student level, I'd go back to that MTSS process. So we have processes in place in each of our building where we monitor growth of students to make sure that they're hopefully moving along at the pace that we would like to see them and closing gaps and so forth. So there's that piece of it. And then we also are able to look at our buildings as a whole to make sure that growth in an individual building is where we need it to be. So when we talk about Title I, that's kind of where we would look to make sure that students are growing in a similar way to a building that might not be receiving Title I services, so we can point to that. So I think with Title I too, it's not necessarily something different that we're providing that we're not providing at other buildings. We're just able to provide more intervention because there's more students that might need it. So we're meeting that need that a building that has a high population of low-income students, when they walk in the door, that they bring to that building. We're meeting the need by staffing more individuals there to meet their needs. So I think we could certainly point to, if we didn't have that level of intervention staffing there, that there would be an impact on how students are performing educationally.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just, ask that as we're heading into the next few years, try and identify opportunities.
Sure.
That we can gather data now and
Yeah.
gather information now that can help sort of tell that story when we need it to. And the only other question, if you don't know the answer, that's okay. How do we compare to other peer districts, other Central Ohio districts, in terms of whatever it was, the 34%? Is that
Yeah, so the
about-
statewide average is 36%.
Okay.
So we're in that ballpark there. And I can get you specific data unless you have it, Trent.
Amber, and I'll just add to that. So the districts that hit 270, so Westerville, a little bit higher than Worthington, but on that track. New Albany has a higher percentage than one might think. But on, Gahanna, going the other direction, part of Dublin, Hilliard. So the 270 districts are all fairly similar up or down. You can think about populations. Now, Delaware County has it's 4%. Upper Arlington is less than that. So, there's significant differences, but I'd say our peers are not necessarily who our parents see as peers all the time, but are the 270 districts, and we're in a similar realm to those districts that all touch 270.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I looked earlier this year, I think we're actually most similar in terms of economically disadvantaged status to Hilliard, which you wouldn't, to Trent's point, you wouldn't necessarily presume that.
Thank you. I think those are all the questions I have.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, that was helpful. Some of my questions have been answered, but what I was mentioning to you earlier about Kilbourne, we're not utilizing services there. And when I look at this chart and I'm looking at Slate, And you said Perry is new this year to school-wide. Is that this year? Or was
Yeah,
it
so
last year?
they've been served under Title I, but this is their first year with that school-wide designation.
So I'm thinking about that feeder pattern going to Kilbourne and getting that school-wide or even targeted assistance and then not. And just those schools being at a higher percentage, and how does that, what are we doing as a district? I know we're doing something. So what are we doing as a district to help that transition as we're going into at the high school level where those services are not, that level up isn't there?
Yeah, I think I'll defer to Ms. Greenwald's presentation down the road on high school options to speak to what intervention at the high school looks like. But I think what I would highlight is that our thinking really is that impact of that early intervention. So all those students end up at Kilbourne High School. Our hope is that intervention that they've received in elementary school and then also in middle school has some sort of benefit for them in helping to prepare them to be successful by the time they reach high school.
Okay. And then I know that you're using MTSS data. So when you see students that aren't meeting a threshold or you're not seeing growth, like what are some supplements, things that we're doing to help continue to close that gap, even if the Title I resources are not beneficial to the students at the time?
Yeah, so obviously we'll work with students through our intervention practices. So if a student isn't demonstrating growth in an intervention setting, first thing we want to really dig in and is really think about what do they need and are we providing what they need in that intervention setting. So that's always the starting point. We do have some students that don't respond to intervention, in which case at certain times it might be necessary to evaluate student, consider special education, or look for, do we have other intervention strategies that we can put in place in our building. So that's really what that MTSS process is about, is it's kind of a guarantee for us that we're going to sit down multiple times a year and talk about each individual student and what they need. And a big piece of that, to your point, Kelly, is are they responding to what they're getting in the classroom? If they receive intervention, are they responding to what we're doing in that intervention setting? So it's always something that we're looking at, and our hope is that our interventionists are trained well enough to be nimble in that response and what students are receiving.
That's helpful. I mean, I appreciate that we utilize this funding on intervention people, so that they can utilize those skills to help support students the best they can throughout, the whole district. And like you're saying, I do appreciate that you focus on early intervention, because that early literacy and those math skills are important early on. And so hopefully we're building a foundation that as they go through middle school, get up to high school, they're feeling supported and have those tools in their pocket in order to be successful. Just how often do you do like the assessment of what the outcomes are, how growth is? Is that something you do annually?
Yeah, so more frequently than annually. So students that participate in intervention, whether it's Title I or not Title I, families will receive progress reports on that intervention throughout the year. And then again, throughout that MTSS process, we'll look at students and assess their progress. Yep.
I think I meant more collectively. Like
I'm sorry, like individual buildings.
Yeah.
So certainly annually, but more than that.
Okay.
So I think this time of year, our minds are all on grade cards, right? And that's one opportunity. But throughout the year, we're also looking at our kind of internal data. So things like map assessments and those types of informational pieces that we get.
Thank you for taking the time. This was extremely helpful. That was helpful to know other of our peers that are similar to our district, and that this grow. I mean, when I look at that number, that's a third of our students. Like we say 34%, but that's over a third of our students. But just seeing that growth is happening, and how we are assessing that, and how we're pivoting in order to be able to best support our students. So thank you for taking your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. That was good. Thanks for putting that together. I'm going to move on to Superintendent's report. Dr. Bowers.
It's my fault, not yours. I know, I'm getting there. So good evening. You know that our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We do that through our 4 vision statements, and so we set this report up under those vision statements. Our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. One of the things that board members and community members should see is that in order to engage our students and help maximize their potential, regular school attendance is critical. As we continue our efforts to decrease chronic absenteeism and increase attendance for our community of learners, Worthington is participating in the Stay in the Game attendance network as an all-star district. So families will begin to see communication about that and just want to encourage all of our students to be in school every day. The second, we'll provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. State law requires, but we're also interested in providing annual lessons for students in grades 6 through 12 on suicide awareness and prevention, safety training in violence, and social inclusion. This law is known as the Safety and Violence Education Save Students Act. To meet these requirements, schools must use a state-approved curriculum. Worthington schools will utilize materials from the Sandy Hook Promise program. So to align with the SAVE Act, we'll deliver 3 lessons during nationally recognized awareness weeks. This is the National Suicide Prevention Week, September 8th through 12th, which will be a Say Something suicide prevention lesson. The Start with Hello Week, which is September 15th through 19th, which is a Start with Hello lesson, and a National Anti-Bullying Week, which is November 10th through 14th, which is the Say Something lesson. Now, reminder, this is through 6th through 12th grade. Our elementary schools are all participating in Start with Hello from the Sandy Hook Promise as well. So although Ohio law requires these lessons, we recognize the sensitive nature of the topics. Families may choose to opt their student out of participation, and students who do not participate will be provided with an alternative activity. The third is we'll provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. In the month of September, schools are required by Ohio law to recognize Patriot Day and National Day of Service and Remembrance on September 11th, and Constitution and Citizenship Day on September 17th. Patriot Day commemorates the lives that were lost and the heroes who risked their lives saving others in the 9/11 attacks. Constitution Day recognizes the adoption of the United States Constitution and those who have become U.S. citizens. Community members will see these recognitions in all of our schools over the next 2 weeks. And then finally, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community resources. As a service industry, staffing costs reflect the majority of our expenditures. This year, we added universal all-day kindergarten to better serve our community. We projected that to do so, we would need to add 3.5 to 4.5 new teachers. In the end, we added 3.5 kindergarten teachers to make that new program happen. The only other additional teaching position that we added this year was a Title I math teacher at Worthington. Federal funds allowed this position to happen, but as you guys know, those funds will be potentially tenuous moving forward. We made many staffing adjustments throughout the school district in order to make sure appropriate staffing follows students. So we start the 25-26 school year with student enrollment at 10,831 students. That's up roughly 100 students from last year. We begin this school year with 4 more teachers than we ended last school year. The ratio of 1 new teacher needed for each 25 students added is an appropriate ratio. In this case, we were able to add the new universal all-day kindergarten program and still stick to this ratio, which we think is a really good thing for us. So President Davis, that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Bowers? Okay. Treasurer's report, Mr. Cusick.
Thank you. First off, we've begun the process of updating our 5-year forecast, and so I've scheduled the Treasurer Advisory Committee and Finance Committee for meetings at the end of this month. Before, the forecast was due in November and May. It's now moving to August and February, but this first year they've given us till October because August has passed. But it will then move to February and August. We've already mentioned insurance costs are under pressure. Our tuition costs are increasing for students placed into specialized programs. But on a good note, I believe our wage projections will be under due to some higher than expected turnover of staff. And so we'll put all that together and review that at the end of the month, and then we'll approve that the first October board meeting. Possible changes to property taxes continue to be on everybody's mind as the legislature works its way through fall session. Governor DeWine's working group seems to be spending a considerable amount of time on a tax deferral option for Ohio. Other states have this option in which a certain, if you meet qualifications, presumably of age or income, then you could defer a portion of your property taxes until either the property is sold or the estate takes ownership. And so they're spending time exploring how that would work in Ohio if Ohio wanted to do that. At the end of the day, whether the legislature accepts any of this group's recommendations that they're going to issue by September 30th or do their own thing will be determined soon, because I think if they want something to be effective in 2026, they need to get that to county auditors probably already. So we'll stay tuned. Somewhat concerning, 3 bills dubbed the Taxpayer Freedoms Trilogy were introduced. 420, 421, and 422. These would eliminate continuing levies, possibly repeal inside millage, and raise the voter threshold for new levies up to 66% rather than a majority. All would have significant consequences for Worthington and districts all over. In addition, House Joint Resolution 6 was introduced that would seek to amend the Ohio Constitution to limit property taxes to 1.25% of that property's true value. So to put that in perspective, if we take a house in Worthington proper that's valued at $400,000, currently it pays about $9,000 in property taxes. 1.25% is $5,000. So we potentially would lose half of our property tax revenue that we would have to seek other revenue streams for. Now, if that were to get, that requires a 3/5 vote of the full General Assembly to then go on to the ballot, which would require a vote of the people to amend the Constitution. So if that goes through, I assume it would be on the 2026 ballot and would be effective in 27. But long story short, there's some fairly radical proposals out there right now that we need to pay attention to. I commend Senator Lou Blessing, a Republican out of the Cincinnati area. He was recently very outspoken against his party and reminded everyone how and why property taxes have increased. He cited reduced state funding of schools, elimination of the estate tax, cutting the income tax and the local government fund, and the explosion of tax abatements, all as contributing factors to a rise in property taxes. And so I think as certainly as treasurers, but as all public ed and local government leaders, we need to continue to remind people of the history of the past 20 years and why this shift to residential property taxes has occurred. And so we'll see. I long for the day when I have a more updated, upbeat treasurer's report, but that is my report.
I long for that day as well. Are there any questions for TJ? All right.
I don't know that this is answerable. If there was a constitutional amendment that limited to 1.5% of the real value, like how do you decide who gets rolled back and who gets what part of the pie of that, like, finite amount of money?
Yeah, my guess would be, you're right, I can't answer that, but I would say that they would reduce that proportionately somehow of what is existing. You know, that's kind of how they came up with inside mills. You know, the question I always get is, why do we have 4.5 inside mills? Well, that's how it was when they came up with 10 and they prorated it based on the tax bills in effect then. So my guess is they would roll every, you know, we're 70-some% of the bill, but we would all get rolled back. I would assume we'd get 70% of the reduction and everybody else would get their share of the reduction.
Yeah, but then if a levy or a bond rolls off, then it gets.
Yeah, so
complicated.
Bond levies would have to be exempt.
Okay.
Although that's a big question. See, when you bring up good points, and that's why the inside millage bill, all the major bond councils in the state came out against that because that would wreck debt. I mean, that might get all our debt called right now. And so they I think when you start to think of these things, the legislature really needs to be aware of the legality of what they're doing.
Fun times. Okay. Moving on to board committee reports and announcements. Amber, I'll start with you.
So it's been busy, I feel like. We had key communicators, which I grabbed my wrong notebook, so I don't have my notes from that. So I'll let you update the rest of the board on that. But it was a good discussion. There was a lot of good questions posed at the beginning through the thought exchange, and I thought it went really well. Meet the Teacher Night, I went to that at Kilbourne. Was very excited to see, Angie's not out there, I was looking, all of the Portrait of a Learner, like just incorporated everywhere. It was, the teachers would take us through sort of, what the plan is for the school year and what they're going to be working on, and they kept harkening back to those larger themes, and it was really, really, I was really proud to see it, and it was really powerful. So I was going to give a shout out to Angie, but she's not there. And I think TJ kind of went through all of the legislative stuff. There's an as-needed session on the 23rd and the 30th. They're still kind of on break. So the governor's work group, they are accepting public comments. So I can send you all the link, and maybe we can share it somewhere, Vicki. It's just like a generic form for the governor's office to basically submit any kind of feedback. It's not specific to the work group, but OSBA shared it earlier in the week to, tell board members to get in there and share some comments if we have them. So I can share that link around here. Yeah, I think that's all I had. Lots of fun football games. So.
All right. And drum major. I'm going to keep bragging about it.
Okay.
Stephanie?
It's been a little quieter for me. I'm going to the Peplin Wagoner Law Seminar this week, so I'm excited about that, weirdly. It's always a little dry, but it's interesting. I will just give a shout out. This is more of a mom thing, but I was off work the other day and I got to volunteer for Worthington Estates calls it Rock and Recess Runners. Every elementary school calls it something different. Day one, we had like 60% of our little kids walking or running that little quarter-mile loop. And if you haven't been to one of the elementary schools and seen them just going around, it is, it's awesome. Because some of them run and they, like my little is trying to win the whole thing. So she just runs. But some of them walk and they talk and they're just moving their bodies. And it's amazing. And I love it. And so that's if you need like a little feel-good moment, drive by an elementary school at lunchtime.
Okay, I haven't really had any committee meetings, but you all on your desk got the letter from the library. It's that time of year that they're looking for a trustee. If you know of anyone, send them to the library website and they can apply by September 30th. And I will work with their governance committee and keep you updated on applications and the whole process, since we will need to vote to approve their trustee in probably a November meeting. And that's all I have.
Sounds good. I only had key communicators. So looking at my notes, just that our enrollment is the highest it's been at 10,831 students this year. So we are growing. We are a growing district. So we're having some growth there. The seniors jumped into the natatorium pool last week. So I know that there were some pictures posted on social media regarding that. And so that was really cool and exciting. So Dr. Bowers gave an update about the natatorium and its progress. And then gave a little bit of an update about what we're doing in our district regarding like harmful names and racial slurs. Am I saying that right? Is the program? Sorry. And then we talked about cereal and yogurt and food services, and just some concerns that parents and families are having about what is offered. And so just having a start of a conversation about that, a bigger conversation about what, where we're putting our money when it comes to lunch. I think that's it for that. So that's all I have. Okay. We are going to move on to item E, actions recommended by the treasurer, routine business. TJ.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes as presented in enclosure E run from August 25th, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or corrections to the minutes? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the appropriations modifications listed in your agenda. These are cross-object categorical transfers that net out to no increase in total.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. Thanks, TJ. Moving on to item F, personnel consent agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items F2 through F8 on your agenda. Items F2 through F8, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G1. Item G1 is the acceptance of the donations that are listed on your agenda. G1, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments about the donations? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G2. Item G2 is the recommendation to approve the resolution confirming the impracticality of busing newly enrolled students to Al Medina Academy.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G3. Item G3 is a resolution confirming the impracticality of busing to newly enrolled students. You've already approved this from a school standpoint, to Columbus School for Girls and the Wellington School.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. All right, are there any requests, questions, concerns from the board?
Do we still, I have not sent you, I apologize, any requests or ideas for our work session? Can we still do that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have agenda prep on Monday,
Okay,
so
great.
make that a goal. We talked about, you asked the question, and I don't know that I answered it, about whether or not to have a presentation on that day. And I'm leaning towards no, if that's okay. Okay. All right. So moving on to calendar, any other requests or questions? Just make sure. Calendar, our next meeting is Monday, September 22nd. That is our work session right here in this room at 6:30. Then we have a little bit of a break because there's a fifth Monday. Happy birthday, Jameson. In September. And so that our next meeting after that is Monday, October 13th. And then we have a Monday, October 27th. Okay. May I please have a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please, TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys. Can I have my